They told Mark it was just a small gathering after work, pizza, sodas, and a chance to relax after a long week of cleaning the Naval Academy's endless corridors. But he knew better. The young sailors snickering behind his back, the exaggerated winks, the way they whispered, "Just wait till he sees her," it all smelled of a setup. Mark Bennett, single dad and janitor, had been the quiet target of light teasing for months. He never complained. He clocked in, worked hard, picked up his daughter Lily from school, cooked dinner, and put her to bed with stories that softened the weight life had placed on his shoulders. And every night, when she slept, he would stare at the faded stack of medals hidden in his closet, symbols of a life he no longer spoke of. He didn't know who they planned to embarrass him with this time. He didn't care. He wasn't there for them. He was there because Lily loved the Academy's Friday gatherings, the free pizza, the music, the sailors who treated her like a little sister. The event hall buzzed with laughter and chatter. Mark picked up plates and cups left behind by the early arrivals, humming quietly. Lily, 7 years old with bright eyes and an even brighter imagination, danced between tables with a slice of pepperoni pizza in hand. That was when the room suddenly shifted. People straightened their posture. Conversations softened. A ripple of respect flowed from one end of the hall to the other. Commander Elena Drake had arrived. The deaf commander. Her reputation preceded her: brilliant, decisive, disciplined. She was revered not just for her strategic genius but also for the way she shattered limits others tried to place on her. She communicated through sign and an interpreter, though many said she was more eloquent in silence than most were in speech. But tonight, she didn't walk in with her usual firm expression. Tonight she looked uneasy. Behind Mark, a group of sailors struggled to contain their laughter. "This is going to be good," one whispered. "Wait till he tries talking to her," another snickered. "She won't hear a word. He'll look like an idiot." Then, loud enough for Mark to hear, someone added, "Who better to match the janitor than someone who can't even hear him?" Mark froze. A hot sting burned his chest. Not for himself. He'd learned to take mockery with a grain of salt. But using her disability as a punchline, that crossed a line he couldn't ignore. Still, he said nothing. He had promised himself he wouldn't draw attention tonight. Commander Drake scanned the room, visibly uncomfortable. Her interpreter was nowhere in sight. People nodded at her respectfully, but no one approached. No one talked to her. She looked, for the first time, isolated. That was when Lily tugged Mark's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, "she looks sad." Mark followed her gaze. Commander Drake stood alone, shoulders tense, eyes down. "Maybe she needs help," Lily said. Mark hesitated. He didn't want to embarrass her by assuming she needed assistance. But then Commander Drake looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment, Mark saw something raw there. Something he recognized: loneliness. He wiped his hands on his janitor's uniform, gave Lily a small nod, and walked toward her. The room fell silent. Every sailor watched. Commander Drake straightened nervously. She lifted her hands to sign. Slowly, uncertainly, her expression apologetic. Mark understood. He responded in sign. Her eyes widened, then softened, then sparked with something almost childlike. Relief. She signed again, faster this time, excitement bubbling from her like a storm breaking. Mark kept up effortlessly. The sailors who set him up stood frozen. Because for the first time, they realized something. Mark was fluent in American Sign Language. He wasn't fumbling. He wasn't guessing. He was communicating with her with a gentle respect that made every spectator feel suddenly, crushingly small. Commander Drake's hands moved quickly. "I didn't know anyone else here signed. My interpreter is stuck in traffic. I feel lost without her." Mark signed back. "Everyone feels lost sometimes. You're not alone here." She stared at him, visibly touched. Then came the question that made the room collectively hold its breath. "Where did you learn to sign so beautifully?" Mark paused. He hadn't spoken of it in years. He signed slowly. "My late wife was deaf. Lily too. I promised them I would always keep our world connected." Commander Drake's gaze drifted to Lily, who was holding Mark's hand. Then, surprising him, Commander Drake kneeled, smiled warmly, and signed hello to Lily. Lily giggled and signed back a flurry of excited phrases. The sailors looked between the three of them in disbelief. "What is happening? How does the janitor know all that? Did we seriously just set up the commander with a guy who signs better than half the base? Embarrassment crept over their faces. But embarrassment alone was not what struck them hardest. It was the way Commander Drake's entire demeanor shifted. She looked peaceful, like someone who had finally been seen. She rose, smiling gratefully at Mark. Then she signed. Would you walk with me? They moved to a quieter corner of the hall. A few sailors followed, pretending to refill plates just so they could eavesdrop. Elena, through signs, asked him more questions, about Lily, about life, about his past. Mark kept his answers simple. But Elena was smart, too smart. At one point she paused, narrowing her eyes. You sign like someone trained professionally, she observed. Mark looked away. He signed. I used to teach deaf soldiers hand signal combat communication. The room went dead silent. Commander Drake's mouth parted in shock. The sailors who had set him up nearly dropped their cups. Mark quickly added, but that was a long time ago. I'm just a janitor now. Elena shook her head decisively. That's not just anything. You served. Mark shook his head. I supported. I wasn't on the front lines. But you contributed, she signed. And you taught communication that saved lives. Her expression softened even more. Why leave that behind? Mark swallowed. He signed carefully. After my wife died, the world got loud. Too loud. Except when I'm signing. Except when I'm talking to people like you. But life. I needed something simple. Something stable for Lily. Elena blinked rapidly, overwhelmed by his honesty. And then she did something no one in the room expected. She took his hand, not romantically, but with a sincerity that made grown men look away. She signed. Thank you for helping me feel seen tonight. Mark smiled warmly, but before he could respond, the hall doors swung open. Commander Drake's interpreter rushed in, flustered and apologizing. When she spotted Mark signing with Elena, she froze mid-step. Elena addressed her in quick signs. You're late. But it's all right. Someone took care of me. She motioned to Mark. The interpreter nodded, slightly stunned. That was when one of the sailors, the one who initiated the setup, stepped forward, guilt written all over his face. Commander, we didn't mean anything by it. We just thought it'd be funny to, well. She turned to him slowly. Her expression sharpened, but instead of anger, her hands moved with calm precision. You thought it would be funny to use my deafness as a joke. The sailor swallowed hard. Ma'am, I'm so sore. You should be apologizing to him, she signed. Every head turned to Mark. The sailor walked toward him, shame flooding his face. Mark, I'm sorry. We shouldn't have. I didn't know any of this. Mark looked at him with an expression he had learned over years of hardship. Kindness. Understanding. He signed slowly, letting Elena interpret aloud. Most cruelty comes from ignorance. Just grow from it. The sailor nodded, tears gathering. Then something unexpected happened. Commander Drake stepped forward, voice steady and clear, her interpreter translating as she signed. I would like everyone in this room to understand something, she said. Respect is not something granted by rank. It is granted by character. She placed a hand on Mark's shoulder. And this man has more character than anyone here tonight. The room fell still. Several sailors lowered their heads, humbled to silence. Lily slipped her hand into Mark's. He squeezed it gently. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Lily signed. Daddy, are you a hero? Mark's heart clenched. He signed back. No, sweetheart. Heroes are the ones who don't need people to know they're heroes. Elena watched this exchange with a soft, emotional smile. Then, breaking every formal boundary, she gave Mark a respectful military salute. Gasps rippled across the hall. Mark froze. He hadn't been saluted in years. Slowly, almost trembling, he returned the salute. Tears filled several sailors' eyes. They had set up a joke. Instead, they witnessed a moment that would stay with them for life. Commander Drake stepped closer and signed. I meant every word. And I hope this won't be our last conversation. Mark smiled, humble and warm. It would be my honor, Commander. As the night wound down, laughter returned, gentler this time, filled not with mockery but newfound respect. Mark gathered Lily in his arms, ready to head home. Before he left, He glanced back at Commander Drake. She signed a final message. "Thank you for seeing me." Mark signed back. "Thank you for letting me." And with that, the single dad janitor walked out. Not unnoticed, not underestimated, but finally seen for who he truly was. A man of quiet strength. A bridge between worlds. And the one person who turned a cruel joke into a moment none of them would ever forget.